Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my regular update from the Capitol. This is a week where lots has been happening both abroad in terms of President Trump's trip and, frankly, more happening on the other side of the Capitol in the House, and I want to talk about both these items. I, like probably most Americans, have been following President Trump to the Middle East, and it has appropriately attracted a lot of news. I mean, you know, the President of the United States in that region saying great things about Syria, Iran, Qatar. Again, improve relations with all these countries makes sense, but it seems like this is Donald Trump solo flying again. One of the things that's not attracted much attention that I'm enormously concerned about is that, you know, America's lead in artificial intelligence is mostly due to the fact that we produce the world's best cutting-edge chips, and something, again, that I'm proud of my background with the CHIPS bill and trying to increase semiconductor manufacturing in America. Some of these chips are called NVIDIA GPU chips, and they are the most cutting-edge, the most essential tool for American leadership in AI. During this trip, and it's not gotten a lot of attention, Saudi, UAE, potentially Qatar, but Saudi and UAE deals are being announced where literally hundreds of thousands of these cutting-edge chips are being purchased by Saudi and the Emiratis. Now, at the top line, that makes some sense as these countries align more towards America. But I got to tell you, it is absolutely critical that we put appropriate security in place. If these chips somehow leave those countries and end up in China, our AI lead that we have spent billions on, the private sector and the government, in the case of combined over hundreds of billions, could evaporate by having these chips, which are prohibited from being sold to China, somehow getting out of Saudi Arabia and the Emiratis and ending up in China. I'm a big believer on these kind of nations that we need to trust but verify. And I spent a lot of time under the Biden administration when the first of these deals were announced between a Emiratis company named G42 and Microsoft. We spent 9 months trying to get the security protocols right. Unfortunately, at this point, I have no idea if there are any security protocols. Now, one of the reasons why I don't think this attracted a lot of attention is because of the, again, jaw-dropping actions of this president to basically accept a $400 million Qatari, souped-up jet to be Air Force One. I mean, is there no clearer case of a clear violation of the emoluments clause in the Constitution where a foreign entity cannot give a gift to a president of the United States that has this kind of value? And the idea the Qataris are doing this just because they expecting nothing in return is naive, to say the least. And I can tell you, again, from my position leading the intelligence community, the amount of time, effort, and stripping down of this jet to make sure there's not bugs or other listening devices or other security breaches on the plane, and it would be a fool to assume they're not put there, would turn this free gift into something that would cost the taxpayers a lot of money. And again, it just baffles my mind that Americans are going to sit by and say the president ought to be taking a $400 million souped-up jet from a country that at times has been a place that has supported terrorists and harbored terrorists. So huge concerns there. So that has taken a lot of the attention around the foreign trip. And meanwhile, back at home, the House keeps barreling along on their so-called one great, beautiful bill. And I can tell you, nothing will be more devastating in Virginia than the kind of cuts that'll take place. A lot of this on Medicaid cuts, and that's going to leave about 14 million Americans without health care, and the number we're trying to refine it in Virginia, it will be in the hundreds of thousands will lose health care, and they'll lose it not only in terms of direct Medicaid expansion, but those Virginians who also buy their health insurance on the market, in the marketplace, they will see price hikes 200, 300, 400% if the subsidies are removed. And come November, if we can't slow this down, it is going to jolt literally hundreds of thousands of Virginians. They'll either lose care or they'll be priced out of coverage. On top of that, candidly, rural hospitals in Southwest and Southside, even in parts of the Valley, they very may have to close their doors. The whole funding cycle of how many, in rural communities, patients are Medicaid patients and the hospital's margins are thin enough, you take this payment system away and this quickly, and you will have rural hospitals across Virginia close. And where will people turn, for example, for OBGYN or other kind of services if you don't have a local hospital? It will be devastating. On top of that, and this hasn't received nearly as much attention, but is going to be cuts to what's called SNAP, but this is basically food assistance. Meals on Wheels will have huge cuts. We spent a long time trying to make sure that kids could get a healthy breakfast at school or at lunch. You could learn a lot better if you've got food in your stomach. Well, those programs will be almost destroyed. And do we really want kids trying to learn hungry? These are pennies on the dollar, but to cut this kind of food assistance, it's just cruel. There's no other word about it. There's no real justification in terms of long-term savings. It also undermines some of our agricultural communities. So we'll see if some of the Republican friends who are expressing these concerns will have the courage to actually say no. But if it does pass the House, I will do everything possible to make sure that these cuts don't take place, and that means we'll have to stop this bill in the Senate. So why don't I stop there and turn it over to Laura and be happy to take your questions.
Senator, our first question is Mitchell Miller with WTOP.
Hi, good morning, Senator. Thanks for joining us. I have a question related to DNI Director Tulsi Gabbard's decision. Wanted to get your reaction to her decision to get rid of the two longtime members of the National Intelligence Council, which, as you know, came shortly after the council issued this assessment on the Venezuelan gang that went against the administration's arguments for invoking the Alien Enemies Act. Are you concerned that this is a movement toward possibly basically tailoring intelligence analysts and reports for the administration in line of what they already want to know?
I absolutely do. I mean, the most important virtue of a strong intelligence service is willingness to speak truth to power. And these National Intelligence Center leaders, they've worked there under Democrats, Republicans. I believe they both actually were serving in the community under President Trump as well in the first term. And the idea that Tulsi Gabbard, who almost daily insults the intelligence workforce by claiming they're deep state or somehow acting against the interest of the administration, she is almost single-handedly destroying the morale amongst our IC community. And we've got in Virginia and the whole DMV, that is where the vast majority of intelligence professionals live and work. And there's not a day that goes by we don't hear of concerns about the politicization of the intelligence product. If that takes place, if she is able to, with her attacks on so-called deep state intelligence officers, and turn the intelligence community to nothing but a endorsement of whatever Trump policy he puts forward, depending on which side of the bed he gets up to in each morning, it will be devastating. It will make America less safe. And as we've already seen, because of her and Pete Hegseth's sloppy handling of classified information, our allies around the world will stop sharing intelligence with us. If they view that the American intelligence services are no longer independent but politicized, they're not going to share their best stuff with us. It's just the fact of life. And I just, again, I know a lot of my Republican friends say they support national security, but their complete silence on this matter, firing of these officials or trying to actually even take the briefers who provide the president's daily brief, which, by the way, he is at an all-time low of even reading or absorbing that information, and somehow move it away from the CIA and move it to the Director of National Intelligence. This is a way to make sure that content is basically driven to reinforce this administration's views. That is dangerous. It undermines the integrity of the intelligence community. And we are seeing a community that is already with extremely low morale. This would be like a gut punch to the professionalism and independence that has been, I think, the hallmark of this community.
Senator, our next question is Mark Gadd with CBS 19.
Hello, Senator Warren. Thanks so much for taking the time to speak to us today. I'm not quite sure if you're exactly familiar with sort of the Federal Executive Institute here in Charlottesville. It was initially slated for to be given to Charlotte City Schools, but then that decision was reversed and the federal government gave it to UVA. Just trying to get there's supposed to be a protest here later today. Just want to get your insights on what are your thoughts on well-resourced universities that seem to be getting more federal support than local public school districts that are in greater need?
I just read about this in the press, but what's pretty remarkable, and I can't make a full judgment on whether closing down this training institute made sense or not. But my understanding is the decision was made to close it. The Trump administration themselves said we're going to then give the property to the Charlottesville schools. And a week later, the same Trump administration says, oh no, we're going to give it to UVA for ROTC training. We have not been briefed. We have not been informed. This appears to be, again, arbitrary, and if you need any further evidence of bias, that the idea of trying to get kids ready for school or preschool opportunities and how this administration is just walking away from all of those commitments, this is an example. What happened, Senator Kaine and I have talked about, can we get fuller answers? I think we're both going to try, but so far, this administration, I've never seen an administration, I've served under Republicans and Democrats, that is less responsive to Congress. Now, I think sometimes they may be more responsive to the members of their own party, the Republican Party, but it's pretty outrageous if to see the school division and being jerked around, as well as my understanding, at least from the press report, was that UVA was frankly surprised that they were suddenly given this property. So we need answers, and it smells more than a little bit fishy, the whole episode.
Senator, our final question is Beth Jojak with Virginia Business.
Hey, Senator Warner. We've been thinking about one of the stated goals of President Trump's trade war is the idea that it's going to help restore domestic manufacturing. And so I was just wondering your thoughts on, do you think that's going to help Virginia's efforts to bring manufacturing back to the Commonwealth?
Listen, we are already being hit repeatedly. We've had decrease of tonnage coming into the port in Hampton Roads. We have a lot of businesses that are international in nature. I think back about the bourbon maker from Richmond who came and talked to me and said, just with the Canadian tariffs, that he's screwed. That Canada's going to be a long time before Canadians start buying Virginia or American booze anytime soon. And we are having small businesses hit across the board. I've heard a lot of, the Vietnamese community, for example. We have a major a number of big Vietnamese population. They all, the stores and entities that import anything, they're getting hit. We've seen a lot of women-owned small businesses being hit. And the idea that somehow this is going to push businesses to do a more American manufacturing, I don't buy it. I mean, I was a business guy for a long time. What businesses want the most is predictability. They will always say, give us the rules. We may not like them, but we will operate on them as long as you don't keep constantly changing. This administration has managed to, frankly, make enemies out of all of our allies at the same time as he tries to convince Americans that countries like Syria and Russia ought to be our friends. I don't know of a single American business, no matter what the press announcements are, that are seriously going to invest in Virginia or America as long as this tariff overhang and lack of predictability continues. It is Business 101, and for a guy that claims to be a great deal maker, we've seen one trade deal announced with the UK that you look beneath the hood, there's not much there. We've seen a temporary pause for 90 days on the most exorbitant pieces with China. And frankly, China is the country that we should have targeted tariffs with. But we do that with friends. You can't do that with friends when you manage to make all of your friends around the world mad. And the thing that I see even in the intelligence is, country after country is starting to think that China is a more reliable trading partner than America. That's astounding and goes against everything that we, for the last 20 years, have tried to work to move countries away from China. We're losing all that real time. And I think you're going to see not only prices go up, but I also think you're going to see, because of this uncertainty, domestic manufacturing, frankly, stay stable or potentially even go down.
Senator, that was our final question.
All right. Thanks, everybody.